I am, by nature, a methodical person. I keep logs of things that other people would never think to document: server uptimes, patch schedules, the exact timestamps of power fluctuations in buildings I've worked in. It's an occupational habit, the kind that bleeds out of your professional life and into your personal one without you noticing. Until one day you realize you've been keeping a spreadsheet of your grocery purchases for 3 years, and you can't fully explain why. I say this not as an apology, but as context, because the logging is what revealed it. And if I had been a different kind of person, a looser, less precise kind of person, I might have gone on living in that apartment for years without ever understanding what was happening on the other side of my front door. The knocks started in September. I remember because the weather had just turned. That first real bite of autumn cold that makes the city feel like it's contracting, pulling itself inward, and I had just gotten into bed when I heard it. 3 knocks. Slow, evenly spaced, firm but not aggressive. The kind of knock that belongs to someone who is certain you are home and is in no particular hurry. I lay still and listened and heard nothing else. No footsteps retreating down the hall, no other doors opening, no voices. I got up and checked the peephole, and the hallway was empty in the way that hallways are always empty at 3 in the morning, yellow and still, and slightly too long-looking through the fisheye lens. I went back to bed and forgot about it by morning. It happened again 4 nights later. 3 knocks, same cadence, same hour. I checked my phone when it woke me, 3:07 a.m., and lay there waiting for a follow-up that never came. I got up, checked the peephole, saw nothing. This time I mentioned it to my neighbor across the hall, a retired schoolteacher named Mrs. Aldea, who had lived in the building for over 2 decades and knew everything about everyone in it. She looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read and told me the building had thin walls and sound traveled strangely, that it was probably someone several floors up. She said it with the practiced ease of someone delivering a rehearsed answer, and I remember thinking that was an odd thing to notice, but I let it go because I was tired and unconvinced that it mattered. By the 3rd occurrence, I had started keeping a record. I don't know exactly what prompted it. Professional instinct. Probably. The same reflex that makes me tail a suspicious process in a system log before I know whether it's relevant. But I opened a notes file on my phone and wrote down the date, the time, and the number of knocks. September 4th, 3:07 a.m., 3 knocks. September 8th, 3:12 a.m., 3 knocks. September 14th, 3:02 a.m., 5 knocks. I stared at that last entry for a moment, because 5 felt different from 3, felt like a deviation from a pattern I hadn't yet fully identified. And I noted it and went back to sleep and tried to treat it as data rather than anything more significant. October came, and the knocks became more frequent. Every 2 or 3 nights, always between 3 and 3:15 in the morning, never accompanied by a voice or a follow-up or any sound of departure. The number of knocks varied: 3, 5, 3, 3, 2, 5, 4, 3, and I logged every one with the timestamp and noted whether I had heard any sound before or after. I checked the peephole every single time. The hallway was always empty. I asked the building manager if there had been any complaints about late-night noise on my floor, and he said no, with the same quality of blankness that Mrs. Aldea had shown, that same smoothed-over affect. And I went back to my apartment and looked at my notes and told myself I was building a pattern out of coincidence, because my brain was the kind of brain that looked for patterns even where none existed. It was in the 2nd week of October that I copied the knock counts into a proper document and laid them out in sequence. 3, 5, 3, 3, 2, 5, 4, 3, 2, 3. I looked at it for a while and felt nothing, just a column of single-digit numbers that refused to resolve into anything coherent. I tried grouping them different ways, pairs, triplets, running them through sums, and found nothing. I went to bed unsatisfied and woke at 3:04 to 5 knocks, slow and deliberate, and typed them into my phone in the dark, and went back to sleep with the unpleasant sensation of a problem sitting just outside the reach of my understanding. I don't remember exactly when the idea occurred to me to treat the numbers as Morse code. I think it was a Sunday afternoon in late October, gray and rain-swept, the kind of day that turns the mind inward. I was looking at the sequence again with fresh eyes, and something shifted in my perception of it. A reframing, the way a picture that looks like one thing suddenly resolves into another. And I pulled up a Morse code chart and began to match. 3 knocks, 3 dots, a pause between groups I had been noting as longer silences. 5 knocks, 5 dots, H3, S again. What I had was not a random sequence of numbers. What I had, when I mapped it with the pauses I had been logging as separate entries, was a sequence of letters. And the letters, when I read them in order, spelled a single word, spelled it slowly and patiently over the course of 6 weeks, 1 or 2 letters per visit, spread across the small hours of consecutive nights. The word was my name. I sat with that for a long time. I sat with it the way you sit with information that your mind accepts before your body does, feeling the understanding arrive in stages, the intellectual recognition first, and then, later, the physical response, the coldness that started at the back of my neck and moved downward, the way my apartment seemed to reconfigure itself slightly around me, the familiar space made strange by what I now understood was happening inside it. Someone on the other side of my door had been spelling my name in knocks for 6 weeks. Not randomly, not coincidentally, not the product of a pattern-hungry mind imposing order on chaos. Deliberately, letter by letter, night by night, at 3 in the morning, with full knowledge of who lived behind that door. I checked the log again. There were 3 letters left in the sequence if it continued. I knew my own name, knew exactly how many characters remained, and I realized as I stared at the screen that I had received the last knock 2 nights ago, which meant the next one was due, by the established rhythm, tonight. I looked at the clock. It was 11:47 p.m. I did not sleep. I sat in the chair facing my front door with every light in the apartment on and my phone in my hand, and I watched the door in the way that you watch something when watching has become the only action available to you. The building settled, and the radiator knocked, and somewhere above me a pipe gurgled, and the street outside offered up its usual ambient murmur, and I sat and watched and waited. At 3:09 a.m. the knocks came. 4 of them. Slow, deliberate, unmistakable. I did not go to the peephole this time. I already knew what I would see. Instead, I opened my notes file and typed the number 4, and sat there as the silence after the knocks stretched out and became ordinary silence again, became the silence of a building at night, becomes the kind of quiet you would find unremarkable under any other circumstances. I stared at the 4 and thought about what letter it represented, and felt something cold settle permanently into the space behind my sternum. I searched the building register the next morning. I asked the building manager for a list of current tenants under the pretense of organizing a floor-wide noise complaint, and he gave it to me with some reluctance, and I went through every name on the 3rd floor and cross-referenced them against the faces I knew from the elevator and the elevator and the mailboxes and the occasional hallway exchange. Everyone on my floor was accounted for. Everyone had a face and a name and an ordinary reason for being there, except for the tenant registered to Unit 3B, directly across from my door, who was listed under a name I didn't recognize, and whose door I had never seen open, and whose face I had never seen at all in the 3 months I had lived there. I knocked on 3B that afternoon. Once, twice, 3 times. No answer. I pressed my ear to the door the way you do when you want to feel foolish, and heard nothing. No movement, no sound, just the same quality of heavy stillness that emanates from a room that has been empty for a long time. I stepped back and looked at the door and felt the wrongness of it, the specific wrongness of an absence that presents itself as a presence, of a vacancy that is somehow occupied. I moved out at the end of October. I finished my lease early and paid the penalty and told the building manager it was a job relocation, which he accepted with the same expressionless efficiency with which he accepted everything. I packed in 2 days and left on a Wednesday morning, carrying the last box past Unit 3B without looking at the door, without slowing down, without giving whatever was on the other side of it any indication that I knew it was there. That was 8 months ago. My new apartment is on the 6th floor of a modern building with a digital entry system and a concierge desk staffed around the clock. And I have not heard a single unexplained knock since I moved in. I sleep well, mostly. I've stopped keeping the log. But last week I opened the notes file again, the original one, and looked at the full sequence from beginning to end. And I counted the letters, and I sat there for a long time doing the arithmetic I had been avoiding since October. My name has 6 letters. I had received 6 letters worth of knocks. The last one on the last night I was there, the night before I decided to leave. The sequence was complete. It had finished spelling my name the same night I realized what it was doing, which means whatever was behind that door wasn't introducing itself. It wasn't asking to be let in. It had been watching long enough to know exactly when I had figured it out, and the last knock wasn't the end of a message. It was a response.